สวัสดีครับ I'm Point from ค้นพบ It feels great to be back doing videos again. I do apologize once again for disappearing for so long without any notice. Today I want to talk about a subject which I think is very important and that I've been meaning to talk about for a long time now. And that is, what is the difference between judgment and understanding? Now, obviously, it can seem confusing at times what the difference is. Sometimes we may think that they are really the same thing. But actually, I think there is a subtle but important distinction to make when talking about the two. First of all, judgment comes from a place of ego. And I talk about the ego a lot in my previous videos. So I'm sure you know what I'm referring to. Ego meaning self-concept, attachment to your identification, to your sense of identity, right? So judgment comes from a place of ego. Judgment and understanding, if I may use this analogy, in my view of it, it is like a fork in a road. Judgment going one way, understanding going the other way. Judgment goes down a road that leads to suffering ultimately, and we'll get to why in a moment. Understanding, on the other hand, actually comes from a place of compassion and also wisdom. Understanding is the opposite of judgment. Now, understanding does not mean that we do not recognize that there was some wrong that has been done. Say, for example, somebody cheated somebody else in a business deal or had an affair in a relationship or whatever it may be, any wrong that was done. Understanding does not mean that we ignore the wrong that has been done. Actually, it means that we recognize the wrong that has been done, but at the same time, we understand the human condition, that we all make mistakes, and that ultimately evil stems from ignorance. And of course, I talk about these concepts a lot in my videos here on ค้นพบ. So I won't go into detail in today's episode. Right? So you can begin to see that these two roads lead to very different paths. Understanding leads to also forgiveness. And so how does one develop or cultivate the ability to understand? Now, I want you to think about this for a moment. It is easy to understand why somebody did something wrong when we're not affected, right? When we're not a stakeholder or when the wrong has not been done to us. But what I think is the true litmus test or the true test of, say, your maturity or your level of development or conscious development, whatever you want to call it, is to be able to stick to understanding when something wrong or hurtful has been done to you. Wouldn't that be fair to say? So understanding comes from, again, seeing the human condition, the flaws of our human mind, the imperfections that are in all of us, the mistakes that we all make, the mechanisms that drive us to make those mistakes, that produces suffering in ourselves and suffering in other people. Somebody who understands, comes from a place of understanding, also wants to understand the other person's behavior for the sake of understanding and in order to bring out the best part in them, to be able to guide the other person into a better place in life, into a more developed place in life, into a place where they produce less suffering for themselves and for the people that they have hurt. So you can see that this is a big difference from judgment, which comes from ego, which says, he was wrong, she was wrong, I was right, I was the victim, how dare he, how dare she, they are evil, he is evil, she is evil, all those things. So understanding comes from understanding that life is difficult, and seeing in yourself your own mechanisms in your mind that come from fear, right? Fear of losing validity, fear of losing love, fear of being judged, fear of making mistakes, fear of being a failure, anything, you name it. And you understand how this force of fear, when one is trying to mature in life, how this force of fear that is in all of us is so strong and often pushes us to make unwise mistakes. And therefore how we produce our own suffering, right? Say you don't like what you see in the behavior of somebody else. You judge that person. This story plays in your head over and over and over again. How dare he, how dare she, how dare she, how dare they take advantage of me in work, how dare they manipulate me in the relationship, how dare they cheat me in the business deal or in the finance, how dare they steal money from me, how dare they deceive me, and you see how when you really contemplate and sit in silence, which is often why they say silence is the best teacher. When you sit in silence and contemplate on this a lot, you see that you can literally be sitting in the comfort and safety of your room, of your home, and you think about what has happened and you suffer as well. When the reality of the situation may be very far away from you, or it may be long in the past. So you begin to see that suffering is actually made by your mind. It's very counterintuitive, but I think a lot of life is indeed counterintuitive. So once you begin to see that all these mechanisms are in you, you also begin to see the same mechanisms in everybody else. And you understand, hence why this is called understanding, you understand that we are all vulnerable in that sense. We are all prone to this mind-made sense of stress, anxiety, and suffering. And when you see that in yourself and see that in other people, you are more willing to forgive and to understand, right? Because you begin to see that, yes, that person's behavior is inexcusable. There is no giving it any excuse. What they did was clearly wrong. But at the same time, you begin to see that that person made those behaviors perhaps out of their own fear and ignorance and their own selfishness, which comes from fear, their own survival drive. Survival drive meaning that the survival of their self-concept, their sense of self, and their agendas in pursuit of their pleasure or success or whatever it is that you're dealing with. And once you see that selfishness, jealousy, greed, envy, these things come from essentially a fear, if you really think about it, and how you see this in yourself as well, in other domains of your life, that is when you begin to truly understand life more. And you begin to become a flower that blooms, I think. A flower that really blooms and becomes beautiful because you bring so much, a presence in your life wherever you go. And people do pick up on that because they begin to see that you're empathetic, you're understanding, you're not judging people, right? So that's what judgment is that's what understanding is in a nutshell. So what about judgment? Judgment is when you walk down the road called ego. It is labeling evil in some other action, in some other person's action, right? He cheated me, she had an affair on me, the boss is unfair, blah, blah, blah. And in doing so, you make a division between you or what it is you're trying to protect through that judgment, right? Think about it. It's a defense mechanism if you think about it. The judgment is made in order to protect some sense of self-concept, right? You divide that with between yourself and the other person. And therefore, there must be one side that is wrong and one side that is right. One side that is the aggressor, one side that is the victim. But you see, once you think down that road, you cultivate anger, you cultivate perhaps hatred or a need for revenge and vengeance. And in doing so, you repeat the cycle. That's why I guess in Buddhist terms, they talk about the wheel of samsara. The cycle of suffering, the cycle of karma, you see. The ego loves judgment because the ego loves to feel validated. That's key. The ego loves judgment because it wants to feel validated. It wants to feel strengthened. It wants to feel righteous. I am the victim, that person is the victim, that person is the aggressor. I have the moral high ground. So even though you have suffering, but the ego gains some very basic form of benefit per se, even though it doesn't serve your happiness and peace of mind and human development. You see? The ego gains by growing its sense of self, identification, right? And ultimately, you suffer. The one who makes a judgment is the one who walks down the road and is less likely willing to forgive. And when you're less likely willing to forgive, you hold on to a very heavy narrative for your mind, the story that you paint about yourself. Oh, I have been so wronged in many, many ways in my life, in my career, in my family relationships, in my romantic relationships. Life's unfair. You hold on to that narrative, that story that you tell yourself about who you are, and it's very heavy for your ego to take. It's very heavy for your soul to take per se. And understandably, you may be correct in your level of analysis, but you see, the moment you walk down the road of judgment, it actually doesn't produce any sense of clarity of mind to then solve the issue or to then forgive and let go and move on, you see? Because you're stuck. Whereas understanding, you have a higher chance to arrive at clarity of mind. You understand the nature of life, that yes, life can be very cruel and very unfair at times, but you also know how to respond and react to it in a healthy and mature and a powerful way because you feel in control. You don't feel the need to hang on to hate or revenge or suffering because you can learn to let go. And that's why that's why understanding comes from compassion. And it leads you to be willing to forgive more. Whereas judgment is the work of the ego. It's the work of the mind and the self-deception mechanism that goes on to get you to really be invested and believe in the story that you tell about what happened between you and somebody else that did you wrong. Yes, that person perhaps did you wrong. I understand. I am not watering that down. I'm not denying hurtful things that has happened to all of us. Everybody has had some unfortunate event that happened to them, obviously. I'm not denying that. But what I'm proposing here in today's video is that perhaps it is about time to consider how is that truly benefiting us. Ask powerful questions, you know. And once you ask powerful questions, you will find powerful answers. And you will realize that holding on to that does you more harm than good. And that is the beginning of transcendence per se. You transcend the suffering that has been done to you in the past or that is still going on right now. And you begin to have clarity of mind and understanding and a willingness to forgive other people and also yourself in the case that the mistake was made by you. If you judge others less, you also judge yourself less. Now this is why it's counterintuitive, because actually if you judge yourself harshly, you're less likely to be able to grow and mature and learn from your mistakes. But if you understand and really seek to correct what has been done wrong, both by you or perhaps by somebody else, then you have a higher chance to walk a more healthy path of forgiveness and and of growth. Again, understanding and forgiveness does not mean denying the wrong that has been done, and that this is a very important point. It doesn't mean that you say to the person, okay, I forgive you now, please continue to do those harmful things to me. No, it doesn't mean that at all. It means you understand the human condition because you see the same mechanisms that produce hurtful things, that lead to harmful behaviors. You see the mechanism in other people's minds because you see the same mechanism operating in yourself. And you can understand that as a human condition as we all learn to grow and develop in life. So that's what I wanted to share in today's video. I hope it was valuable for you. And also, as you know, as I talked about last week in the last video, I am now a mental health coach with the Thrive program, which is a psychological training program from the United Kingdom. So I also have a page there, and I also do some videos there too, even though they're shorter videos. And I talk more specifically about my work there. And you can follow me there if you wish, and I would really much appreciate it. Thank you very much for staying tuned. I will see you next time. And yeah, สวัสดีครับ